Welcome to the Image of History channel. Get ready to explore 100 photos of American history that will blow your mind. A Texas Ranger during the Civil War before becoming a cattle businessman, Texas John Slaughter opened his final ranch near Douglas, Arizona. Robert G. McCubbin, the world's foremost Old West photo collector, says this circa 1885 cabinet card of his cowboys is the best group photo of real working frontier cowboys. The only men to hang in Fort Smith, Arkansas for rape. These 5 members of the Rufus Buck Gang were executed on July 1, 1896. This is the largest mass execution for rape in U.S. history. This is a hansom cab on Union Square, New York City. The hansom cab was a popular horse-drawn carriage invented in 1834 by Joseph Hansom. It was designed to be a safer and more maneuverable alternative to the larger four-wheeled carriages of the time. Alaska was the 49th state to join the Union, officially becoming a U.S. state on January 3, 1959. The 49th star, representing Alaska, was added to the U.S. flag on July 4, 1959, in accordance with the tradition of updating the flag on Independence Day after a new state's admission. This photo captures the moment a United States allotting surveyor and his interpreter made an American citizen of Chief American Horse. The native man in the war bonnet is Chief American Horse, a prominent Oglala Lakota leader participating officially in legal proceedings aimed at integrating Native Americans into the broader framework of U.S. citizenship and culture. The first dome on the U.S. Capitol building was completed in 1823. After the building was expanded in the 1850s, it was deemed unpleasant to look at, and a project to replace it began in 1855. The second dome is still in place today. A family from Oklahoma stands by the highway between Blythe and Indio. Forced by the drought of 1936 to abandon their farm, they set out with their children to drive to California. Picking cotton in Arizona for a day or two at a time gave them enough for food and gas to continue. This is a photo of the Havasupai people who lived in the Grand Canyon for about 800 years before the park's founding. The tribes lost many acres of land and were displaced from their homes. These women are building a bomber, a B-17F bomber, also known as a flying fortress. During World War II, when most of the men had been drafted to war, millions of women worked in factories, while others volunteered for the Red Cross to serve war efforts. This is the very first known photograph of the White House ever. It was taken in January 1846 by a Welsh immigrant named John Plumb Jr., who was one of the country's first prominent professional photographers. This is a real picture taken in 1840 of children pulling a turkey cart. This image provides a shocking revelation of how turkeys were used for other things besides consumption as it is today. Here's a photo of Harvey Milk at the 7th Annual Pride Parade on June 26, 1978. Harvey Milk was the first openly gay elected official in the history of California. He was assassinated after serving just 11 months in office. This is a photo of Abraham Lincoln at Antietam in 1862 during the Civil War. The Battle of Antietam was one of the most important wins for the Union troops, though it was also known as the bloodiest battle in United States history. These people were the first audience to use 3D glasses in cinema in 1952 during the opening night screening of Buona Devil. The movie was a commercial success and is credited with sparking the 3D craze in the 1950s. This is President John F. Kennedy giving a speech at his inauguration. This is where he declared that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans. This picture was taken in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, in 1903. It is the first powered flight ever. Orville Wright is on the plane, manning the controls while the man standing is his brother, Wilbur Wright. The California Gold Rush was a transformative event in American history, beginning in 1848 and peaking in the early 1850s. It drew hundreds of thousands of people from around the world to California in search of wealth. During World War II, widespread looting and pillaging occurred amid the chaos and collapse of order brought on by intense battles and military occupations. Both Allied and Axis forces participated in these acts, seizing valuables, food, and supplies from civilian homes, businesses, and military depots. While some looting was driven by the immediate needs of soldiers, much of it stemmed from opportunism and the erosion of wartime discipline. In his book, A Cowboy Detective, Charles Siringo wrote about his adventures with W.O. Sales, but Robert G. McCubbin, who owns the album and print taken while the two Pinkerton detectives were on the trail of the Wild Bunch in 1899 to 1900, noticed that Siringo, Wright, had identified his partner, Far Right, as W.B. Sayers. Siringo changed the names of many people in his 1912 book to hide their identities. The Vietnam War was a disaster for the U.S. Nearly 60,000 deaths, intense division back home, and a painful legacy akin to a gaping wound in the national psyche. On August 4, 1965, New York Yankees legend Mickey Mantle famously tossed his batting helmet away in frustration during a game against the Chicago White Sox. Mantle reportedly went hitless in the game despite his efforts. This is the first oil well in the U.S. drilled by Edwin Drake in 1859. While this oil field brought about opportunities, it also caused deforestation, water contamination, and air pollution. This is civil rights activist James Meredith after being shot in Hernando, Mississippi on June 6, 1966, during his solo march against racism and fear. He had defied segregation to enroll at the University of Mississippi. Despite being shot, Meredith completed his protest march after receiving treatment for his wounds. Frances Benjamin Johnston was one of America's earliest photographers. These children gathered around her to peer at her camera because photography was still quite novel at the time. This 1886 photograph of Montgomery, Alabama, shows the historic Capitol building and the Capital City Street Railway. The city has a place in Civil War history, as the Confederate States of America was officially established there in February of 1861. This is a picture of Jeannette Rankin speaking at the headquarters of the National American Woman Suffrage Association in 1917. A year prior to this moment, she made history by becoming the first woman elected into Congress. After child labor laws banned U.S. factories from hiring children, many children began working on farms because farming was largely exempt from early labor regulations. Farming was seen as a family responsibility and wasn't considered dangerous to children, unlike factory work. This photograph shows one of the final legal executions by hanging in the United States, taken in 1898. A reminder of a bygone era of public justice, the image reflects the period's legal practices and shifting attitudes toward capital punishment at the turn of the century. This is a picture from the first ever Super Bowl. Football's escalation in the American consciousness took a great leap forward when Bart Starr led the Green Bay Packers to a win over Kansas City Chiefs. Native American tribes used highly resourceful and sustainable hunting techniques tailored to the environments they lived in. Bows and arrows were among the most common tools for hunting. However, other tools like spears and atlatls were used to hunt larger animals like bison, elk, and deer. In 1919, the deck of the ship, USS Agamemnon, was crowded with cheering soldiers as they returned home from the battlefields of France at the end of the war. Over 4.5 million Americans served in the United States military war efforts. This 1936 photograph by Dorothea Lange shows an impoverished American family living in a small, makeshift hut in Elm Grove, Oklahoma. The family is clearly struggling, with their clothing torn and shoes non-existent, highlighting the severe poverty they faced during the Great Depression. Lange's image captures the heartbreaking reality of life for many during this time, living in shacks, barely surviving, and left with little hope for a better future. This photo shows the interior of a pacemaker's workshop in a tenement building in Ludlow Street, 1920s New York. This is an example of a sweatshop, as it is a workshop that hires manual workers at very low wages for long hours and under poor conditions. This American soldier is pictured sleeping on his ammunition in the Mason area during the Korean War. The war began in 1950 with the invasion of South Korea by North Korea and ended in 1953 in a ceasefire agreement. In 1862, a group of enslaved men, women, and children escaped from their masters' plantations to seek refuge behind Union lines. They became labeled as contrabands and enrolled to support the war instead of being returned. Death Valley, California. At 282 feet below sea level, Death Valley is one of the most inhospitable places in California. Temperatures in the hottest time of year can regularly exceed 120 degrees Fahrenheit. In fact, at 134 degrees Fahrenheit, Death Valley maintains the highest temperature on record. The deadliest hurricane and natural disaster in U.S. history was the Great Storm of 1900. The storm made landfall in Galveston, Texas, and this photo shows the aftermath. In April 1920, Herbert McBride broke the world's motorcycle record for amateurs with a speed of 104.4 miles per hour. Staff Sergeant Maynard Harrison Smith of the United States Army Air Forces is decorated with the Congressional Medal of Honor for his conduct as a gunner aboard a B-17 Flying Fortress bomber during World War II. This iconic picture shows the East and West shaking hands at the completion of the first transcontinental railroad project in 1869. However, historians have noted that Chinese laborers, who made up the majority of the workforce, were left out of the picture. This somber photograph from 1938 shows a group of unemployed workers sleeping in the bandstand at a park, representing the extreme poverty and hardship that many Americans faced. With millions out of work and little support from the government, people were forced to find whatever shelter they could, even if it meant sleeping in public spaces like this. The bandstand, typically a place for music and leisure, had become a refuge for those who had lost everything. An unidentified soldier wore the "War is Hell" slogan on his helmet. This photo was taken in 1965 during the Vietnam War. This phrase became popular during that period as the public voiced their opposition at the cruelty of the war. Tears streamed down the cheeks of this accordion player as he performed during late President Franklin D. Roosevelt's funeral. Everyone in the picture is mourning, which is a testament to how much the people love President Roosevelt. This is the moment Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson takes the oath of office as President of the United States shortly after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. The woman beside him is Jacqueline Kennedy, the late president's wife. These commuters are reading about the assassination of John F. Kennedy on November 22, 1963. It was a tragic event in the United States of America when the president was shot to his untimely death. In 1929, before the stock market crash that marked the beginning of the Great Depression, the unemployment rate in the United States was 3.14%. In 1933, in the depths of the Depression, 24.75% of the labor force was unemployed. Despite the significant attempts at economic recovery by President Franklin D. Roosevelt and his New Deal, real change only came with World War II. On December 1, 1955, Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to give up her seat to a white passenger on a public bus in Montgomery. While she wasn't the first to challenge racist segregation laws, her famous act of civil disobedience sparked the Montgomery bus boycott. Jubilant Americans in Washington, D.C. put up newspaper headlines announcing Germany's surrender, ending World War I on November 8, 1918. This celebration was worldwide as people were relieved by the end of the war. This 1940 photograph captures a group of Native Americans dancing and celebrating during a powwow at Arley, Montana. The men wear headdresses, jewelry, decorated vests or leather shirts, aprons or decorated leggings, beaded moccasins, and leg bells. The powwow is categorized by singing and dancing, and features dances like the grass dance, fancy dance, and jingle dress dance. The purpose of this social gathering is to celebrate their culture, history, and traditions. This is a photo of John Herbert Dillinger, a notorious criminal from his formative years. He was the commander of the Dillinger Gang. The gang robbed 24 banks and 4 police stations. He was also arrested several times for multiple crimes, but he escaped twice. John Dillinger was not only a thief, he was also a murderer. John was charged but never convicted for the murder of an Indiana policeman who shot him during a shootout. On March 30, 1981, an assassination attempt targeted President Reagan. The gunman fired 6 shots from the crowd at the president, but Secret Service agent Timothy J. McCarthy jumped in the line of fire to save the president. An American serviceman shares his rations with 2 Japanese children in Okinawa, Japan in 1945. This photo was taken shortly after the Allied forces took control of the island of Okinawa and the Japanese government surrendered. The notorious Andersonville prison, officially called Camp Sumter, was a Confederate prisoner of war facility in Georgia. About 13,000 of the 45,000 prisoners there died due to the poor conditions. This photograph shows the commandant of the camp being hanged for war crimes after the war ended. These women are some of the many vagrants residing in police lodging houses during the Great Depression. They had no access to clean water, proper sanitation, or medical care. Sometimes the men living in these houses faced police brutality, as they were often treated like criminals. The only difference between living in a police lodging house and on the cold streets was that the houses had roofs to protect people from rain and warmth during the winter. The ultimate frontiersman, Kit Carson was a fur trader, explorer, mountain man, guide for John Pathfinder, Fremont, and an Indian agent. The image of this brave man was probably taken sometime in the 1850s. Major Charity Adams addresses a contingent of the Women's Army Corps. The group was known as the 6888 and was the first group of black women to be deployed in Europe to sort mail for troops overseas. In the 1890s, Coney Island in Brooklyn, New York was emerging as one of the most popular leisure and entertainment destinations in the United States. Steeplechase Park and Sea Lion Park opened in the 1890s, followed by Luna Park and Dreamland in the early 1900s. This is a photo of Ponder House not long after the Battle of Atlanta in 1864. Confederate troops had occupied the house, and it was shelled by Union forces. You can still see the bullet holes all over the building. Stephen F. Austin, also known as the Father of Texas, formed the Texas Rangers in 1823. They played a significant role in Texas history, evolving from a small militia force into one of the most storied law enforcement agencies in the U.S. An aerial view of the battleship USS Oklahoma, originally built in 1910. The Oklahoma was operated by the U.S. Navy until she was sunk in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii in December 1941. A Hooverville in Central Park, New York City during the Great Depression. Hoovervilles were makeshift shanty towns named derisively after President Herbert Hoover, whom many blame for the economic collapse and the suffering that followed. These communities sprang up across the country as homeless families and unemployed individuals were forced to build shelters out of scrap materials like wood, cardboard, and metal. In Central Park, one of the most iconic locations in the city, a community of displaced people struggled to survive amid the heart of New York's wealth and industry. On May 31, 1889, over 20 million tons of water broke through the South Fork Dam after a heavy rainfall, destroying almost everything in its path. The South Fork Dam was located above Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and the floodwaters surged into the town, killing more than 2,200 people. The disaster was one of the deadliest in U.S. history, wiping out entire neighborhoods and leaving thousands homeless. This is a rare, clear picture of a Native American leader and warrior wearing his traditional garments, including a war bonnet. The mark on his face is a face paint the Native Americans draw on their faces, which have deep cultural, spiritual, and practical significance. The marks have different meanings and significance depending on the color and pattern. For instance, while red symbolized war, strength, and energy, white face paint represented peace, purity, and spiritual connection. Likewise, while vertical or horizontal stripes might symbolize courage or calmness, circles often represented wholeness, and dots symbolized prayers and blessings. The drought, dust storms, and boll weevils that attacked southern crops in the 1930s all worked together to destroy farms in the South. Outside the Dust Bowl, where farms and ranches were abandoned, other farm families had their share of woes. Farmers could not make money to feed their families or pay their mortgages without crops to sell. Many were forced to sell the land and find another way of life. Sunseekers revel on the sandy beach and in the waters of Lower Bay as the striking tower of Dreamland Theme Park rises in the background. This is the Wawana tree, a soaring sequoia tree that had a tunnel cut through its base in 1881. Sadly, the weakened tree fell during a harsh winter in the 1960s. These swimmers represented the United States of America at the 1920 Olympics in Antwerp. The lady, Ethelda Bleibtreu, won 3 gold medals at the competition. Belle Starr of the Indian Territory was a lady attracted to outlaws. She consorted with some, including Cole Younger, and married others, Jim Reed and Sam Starr. This cabinet card of her on her horse dates to 1886, 3 years before she was mysteriously murdered. This little boy is handing over a letter he wrote to be delivered to Santa Claus. Taken on December 4, 1920, after World War I, this photo represents hope for the nation. This McDuffie suit was an early attempt at creating a diving suit capable of deep-sea exploration. It was constructed primarily of aluminum and weighed 550 pounds. It was extremely heavy and resistant to the pressures of deep water. This photograph shows an elderly woman receiving her Thanksgiving ration of food as a long line of hungry people waits for their turn. During the Great Depression, the elderly, in particular, faced extreme hardship. Many older Americans, often without the physical strength to work or the resources to support themselves, were hit especially hard by the economic collapse. The Bloody Sunday occurred on March 7, 1965, during the Selma to Montgomery marches in Alabama. This photo captured the brutal moment Alabama state troopers and local law enforcement attacked the civil rights demonstrators. Popularly known as the March of the Mill Children, in 1903, Mary Harris Jones led a march to protest against the exploitation of child labor in textile mills and factories. The Young Pioneers, also known as the Pioneer Organization, was a Soviet youth organization that functioned similarly to the Boy Scouts. They're wearing gas masks in this photo as a form of preparedness against all attacks, including gas. Hattie Caraway was the first woman elected to the U.S. Senate. She succeeded her husband as an Arkansas senator, and then she won re-election with more votes than her 6 male opponents combined. Vintage photo of a young Arnold Schwarzenegger in his physical prime between 1960 and 1980. He won several titles from Mr. Universe to Mr. Olympia during his bodybuilding years. This is the last picture taken of Buffalo Bill Cody in January 1917, about 5 or 6 days before his death on January 10, 1917. Cody claimed to have killed over 4,000 buffalo in an 18-month period. This, combined with his scouting and military exploits, helped solidify his reputation as a frontiersman and earned him his famous moniker. In his later years, Cody became an advocate for conservation, particularly for the buffalo, which he had once hunted extensively. On July 22, 1975, this woman and a child jumped out from the 5th floor of a building to escape from the fire, which had broken out in the house. The woman did not survive the fall, but her body cushioned the blow for the little girl, allowing her to survive. Catherine Switzer became the first woman to officially run the Boston Marathon, despite being attacked by the race director who tried to physically pull her out of the race because she was a woman. In the summer of 1963, Birmingham was boiling over as Black residents and their allies in the civil rights movement repeatedly clashed with a white power structure intent on maintaining segregation and willing to do whatever that took. A young woman does the limbo dance at a Los Angeles nightclub, circa 1964. The limbo dance is a traditional Caribbean dance where dancers attempt to pass under a horizontal bar without touching it while bending backward in a limbo position. These are participants in the beautiful leg contest at Palisades Amusement Park. The contestants had to wear pillowcases over their heads so the judges could only see their legs. This is a photo of the Johnson family and shows the harsh reality of life in Scotts Run, West Virginia, during the Great Depression. The Johnson family, like many others in this coal mining community, lived in extreme poverty after the industry collapsed. Scotts Run became a symbol of economic despair, where families struggled to find food, shelter, and basic necessities. In the image, we see a family huddled together in a dimly lit home, their expressions reflecting hardship and resilience. A group of unemployed men stand outside a food kitchen, their faces etched with despair and uncertainty. The economic collapse following the 1929 stock market crash left millions jobless and homeless, forcing them to rely on soup kitchens for their next meal. These kitchens, often run by charities or even figures like Al Capone, were a lifeline for many struggling to survive. This image serves as a reminder of one of the darkest periods in American history, where hunger and hardship became the daily reality for countless families. This iconic orotone by Edward S. Curtis captures a group of Navajo riders on horseback, traversing the floor of Arizona's Canyon de Chelly. Framed by soaring sandstone cliffs, the figures appear small, yet dignified, emphasizing the scale and majesty of the landscape. Rendered in Curtis's signature orotone process, both a work of art and a cultural document, the photograph reflects Curtis's vision of native life in the early 20th century. These shots are from Grace McDaniels, also known as Mule-Faced Woman. She was a circus performer who gained fame in the early 20th century due to her distinctive facial appearance caused by a rare genetic condition. McDaniels joined the circus as a teenager, where she showcased her unique looks and became a central figure in the sideshow exhibits. She was presented as a unique spectacle, drawing crowds fascinated by her appearance. Despite her unusual appearance, she handled her position with grace and was celebrated. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed this journey through the past, don't forget to subscribe and join us for more incredible moments from history. See you next time.